We're here today to do a community notification. We have folks here from the Minnesota Department of Correction. They'll be providing more insight on this notification. At this time, I'll turn it over to Sonia Walker from the Minnesota Department of Correction.
Good morning. As Chief Henthorn has described, that we're going to do a community notification with pairing with the Richfield Police Department. The agenda that we're going to cover in this meeting is we're going to go through the process of registration, community notification, the risk level assignment, the individual themselves, and supportive services resources. So we wanted to introduce and just kind of get out there some of the misconceptions. So when we're talking about those that are registered in our communities, registrants have a history of sexual offending and they live in our communities. So they are amongst us, live, work, and interact in our communities. So in highlighting this, I like to always bring up that Minnesota has always, for the most part, been very proactive. The established registration laws that happened July of 1991 were really in stark response to the Jacob Wetterling case that occurred in 1989, as many of us remember. It was a huge case that entailed just a shocking level of how do we get back to a space of safety and concerns from community members. And so it enacted with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension registration, which is the statute that is listed 243.166. And the contents of registration really are around the address, employment, school, vocation, vehicles, which means all vehicle registration when they are being utilized. It also includes any recreational vehicles, any other second addresses. All that information is registered with our partners at the federal BCA. So registration, what it encompasses is it requires an individual who is convicted, charged, or adjudicated delinquent for specific crimes. And they are specific to criminal sexual conduct, any sexual conduct involving a minor, including possession of child sexual exploitation material, or CSEM for short, child sexual abuse images, kidnapping. There's a multitude level of other crimes that are associated in commission of crim sex conduct, and all go together when requiring an individual to register. So when we take a snapshot of registration, so currently January 1st, 2026 from the BCA, there's approximately in Minnesota 19,951 people required to register in Minnesota. Now, one of the things I want to highlight is that number encompasses all levels and even those that are not assigned a level. And so that is the total amount in Minnesota that are required. When you break that further, a snapshot from August 5th, so just a couple of days ago, there are 431 registrants on the web as of today on the DOC website. And of those, 12 are unknown of addresses. And so then we took a further assessment of in Hennepin County, we looked at those registered of just over 3,000 in Hennepin County. Specific to Richfield, which is your community that we're talking about, there are 69 registrants. Of those 69, 3 are level 3, which has the higher level of notification, which is what we're doing today. And then we looked at the neighboring counties. So we highlighted Ramsey County, which has about 1,500, Wright County, 257, and then Dakota County, 591. So community notification statute, which is listed in retroact from the Jacob Wetterling case, and then the implementation of registration that occurred in 1991. It further went to, in 1997, in Minnesota, the statutes pertaining to community notification, which is the level of notification that a risk level needs in order when they're moving to a community. So we'll go through what the differences are between risk level 1, 2, and 3. So what community notification is, it applies to registrants that are released from prison. They're registrants from other states or federal jurisdictions who are released from prison, including military prisons, those that are civilly committed for sexual offense behaviors. It does not apply to those with juvenile registration offenses only, and a big category of registrants sentenced to probation only. Community notification, so it is implemented, and the responsibility of community notification is from the Department of Corrections in assessing risk and assigning that risk level. Law enforcement, in pairing with Department of Correction, is responsible for the community notification and the scope of notification based on that risk level. So when we look at risk level, level 1, which is the lower risk category, what individuals that are categorized as a risk level 1, law enforcement may notify other law enforcement agencies, notify the victims or witnesses of the offense. I believe that's in accordance, though, if they are wanting to be notified or are registered, I believe, with victim services in their database. Law enforcement also can notify the adults in the household of someone that is under risk level 1. So then risk level 2 takes all level 1 notification levels, and then law enforcement may also notify individuals or organizations based on a registrant's particular offense pattern or history. So what that means is law enforcement may say, okay, this individual has a pattern of behavior that it is minors, it's children, and so they may notify the local schools, they may notify daycares, they also may notify local like associations such as like hockey associations or baseball associations, just in accordance with fitting that offense pattern of behavior. So then when we talk about the highest level of risk, which is level 3, that it combines all of level 1 and level 2 levels of notification. And then specifically level 3 are subject to broad public notification and disclosure. They are registered on the DOC public registrant website. Again, as I mentioned, a public notification meeting. There may be media flyers, so sometimes on Facebook or community boards, agency websites, social media, and maybe door-to-door flyers. So currently, the risk levels, a snapshot of what that looks like in a breakdown, and this is fairly consistent over a 20-year period. It doesn't fluctuate. So when we look at risk level 1s, it encompasses over 56% of those in the community register are at a level 1. Level 2s encompass about 29%, and then level 3s overall are at about 15%. So those that are subject to public notification, so as I had mentioned, August 5th, there's about 431 registrants subject to broad public notification. So that level 3 overall in the state of Minnesota. So when we looked at previous slide, 19,000, almost 20,000, that big number, which has all registrants, those that are assigned levels, which is, I believe, just under 10,000. Of that 9,431 would be under level 3. And then further from that, at this time, 12 registrants are unknown, addresses are unknown. So then when we look at further breaking down misconceptions around level 3, and more importantly, those that are perpetrated in sexual offending, we take a look at broadly that a majority of victims, so children and teen victims, are known. And so when we look at these charts, which has been, again, very stable over a 20-year period and doesn't fluctuate very much, acquaintances and known to the victim rate is almost at 60%. A big portion of that too is usually victims are their family members are the perpetrator, and so that small percentage of 7% are strangers and unknown to the victim. And these snapshots are from the Bureau of Justice statistics. So the age of victims, when we break that down, it's a pretty split pie. So when we look at those victims that are infant to 12, it's about 34%, that age range. And then 13 to 17 age or adolescent victims also make up about 33%. And so just over 67% are in that category that we would say minor victims. And so of then the 33% that are victimized are adults. So in introducing the two members that are moving into the community of Richfield, we have two registrants. One is Jeremy John Queen. So these are the fact sheets breakdown of Mr. Queen. We have listed the vicinity of where he is, his residence. So in Richfield, we've identified. We do not fully disclose, obviously, for the sake of wanting individuals to know and be aware that an individual is moving into your community, but also wanting to provide community notification. So really being mindful of like vigilante or, having that known in that privacy piece. So we do provide as much information. And then obviously, if you have further questions, you can contact the City of Richfield Police Department. And so Mr. Queen's registerable offense, at age 17, Mr. Queen engaged in sexual contact with a known female child on multiple occasions. Contact included penetration. Mr. Queen established a relationship of trust to obtain and exploit unmonitored access. He used manipulation to maintain control. Was convicted 1995 of criminal sexual conduct in the 3rd degree in Dakota County. Criminal sexual assault and contact against a minor female. Mr. Queen was age 17. He was known acquaintance to the minor victim. He engaged in sexual contact with the minor victim, including sexual touching, digital vaginal, and penile vaginal penetration. Mr. Queen used force and threats with a weapon to gain compliance. So Mr. Queen, in March of 1997, entered into prison. September of 2001, he was assessed and assigned a risk level 3. In January of 2020, Mr. Queen transitioned back into the community. So he has been back out in the community since, again, 2020. So for information, so Mr. Queen will be under correctional supervision. So he is currently under probation, community probation, until November of 2026. He is subject to BCA registration until January 2043. The next individual that is moving to the community is Mr. Harold Clayton Lacy. So Harold Clayton Lacy, these are the stats. He is going to be moving to the residence area, the 7400 block Avenue in Richfield. So Mr. Lacy's registerable offense history is Harold Lacy has a history of holding known adult females against their will. Lacy entered one residence without permission. He used force and threats of significant bodily harm, where he used a gun to gain compliance. Lacy has a history of violent assaultive behavior towards romantic partners. In 1997, he was convicted of crim-sex conduct in the 5th degree in Anoka County. Lacy held a known adult female against her will. Lacy used force, strangulation, and threats to maintain control. Lacy gained access by entering the victim's home without permission. He used force and threats of violence to maintain control. In 1997, he was also convicted of assault in the 5th degree in Anoka County. This was for domestic assault, harassment with terroristic threats. So Mr. Lacy entered into prison June of 2000. He was assessed July 30th, 2010 as a risk level 3. June 2026, Mr. Lacy transitioned back into the community. He is currently under correctional supervision, as we call intensive supervised release, until June of 2036. And Mr. Lacy is subject to lifetime registration with the BCA. So under state statutes, what intensive supervised release constitutes is that the primary objective is public safety and in maintenance of compliance with release conditions and successful reintegration into the community. So the release planning process in working with an agent, the main focus is really a collaborative effort between institutional staff and agents. So very much a collaborative effort for the success of reentry into the community. So identifying options for a safe, stable, supportive environment, minimizing risk factors and maximizing protective factors. So what that means is what we know from research is that moving into a community, having stable housing, having vocational or having a job, having a support network that not only is a support, but will hold somebody in accountability so that it is protecting of someone going backwards and essentially lowering the risk of recidivism. Another key factor of ISR is they have a GPS, which is an ankle bracelet, which is global positioning satellite system. So they're able to locate and know where the offender is at all times. They're released from the facility to the ISR agent. So they're under the supervised release as well as the responsibility of the ISR agent. And that agent transports the offender to the approved residence. Many times residents, their job, meeting their support system, whether they are in treatment or in any kind of the community support groups. The ISR agent facilitates and sometimes is very much a part of that process so that, again, successful reentry into the community is the goal. So intensive supervised release, the goal again is it operates on a continuum of a 24/7, 365 days a year, that it's highly structured, that it's a lower caseload, so that intensive supervised release occurs with frequent face-to-face contact, random unannounced visits, daily contact, check-ins, and more importantly, a higher level of supervision in accordance with their risk level 3. So Latanya Reeves is the community agent for Mr. Jeremy Queen. This is her contact information, and he is on probation until November of 2026. The agent in the ISR agent for Mr. Lacy is Tara Oyen from the Department of Community Corrections, Hennepin County. This is her contact as well, and it will be further on the slide if you need to reference that. That is her information for Mr. Lacy. If there is any questions or concerns, one of the key aspects we always want to highlight is successful reintegration in the community is key. That as a community, if there is anything suspicious or questions or concerns, having that connection with your local Richfield Police Department, this is their non-emergency phone number, and asking as well as providing input if there's anything suspicious or anything that you have concerns of. That is something that all of us recommend, of just having those open communication connections with your local police department. And that being said, I will turn it over to Heather.
Thank you, Sonia. Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Coling. I'm a victim services specialist with the Minnesota Department of Corrections. I'm the sexual violence specialist on our unit, so I handle all predatory offender cases. My background is predominantly in being a community-based advocate, working directly with victim survivors of both domestic and sexual violence. I did that for about a decade before I came to the DOC. I'm here today to talk to you about how to have these conversations as families, as community. I want to make it really clear this information can be really scary to receive, but you've already taken the biggest step. You're here. You made it to this point in the recording. You came to the city website to get this information to be more informed. We believe more informed communities are safer communities, so I just want to commend you for making it to this point. As we look at the next slide, I just want to make something very clear. I'm going to give you some safety planning tips for how to have these conversations with your family and with your children, but that is in no way to imply that the victims on any of these cases did or did not do something to welcome the abuse that occurred. The responsibility of abusive behavior always lies with the person being abusive, not the person they harm. That is a full stop. We are not victim blaming in any capacity in this presentation, but I do want you all to have some concrete tools and tips that you can take moving forward into your family safety planning efforts. We're going to look at the prevalence of sexual violence kind of nationally. I do want to be very clear. Mr. Lacy's predatory offenses are against adults. They are not against children. Mr. Queen was a juvenile when he offended against a child. However, it is not lost on us or on law enforcement that when folks hear somebody on the registry or predatory offender, we often think of pedophilia. We have concerns for the children in our lives. So I know that's why many of you likely came to this video. And so those are the safety planning tips and tools I'd like to give you moving forward for how to have these conversations in your communities. Nationally, we know 1 in 9 girls under the age of 18 and 1 in 20 boys under the age of 18 will experience sexual abuse or assaults before the age of 18. So that helps for nationally, but let's look at Richfield. Let's look at what we have your local information on. So on this next slide, we have data that's been pulled from the 2022 Minnesota Student Survey. I want to commend your school district for participating in this survey. It is completely voluntary. They do it every 3 years. So there is 2025 data out, but the Department of Education has not placed it in kind of a digestible table like this. So for the purposes of this presentation, I've pulled the 2022 data. However, the 2025 data is available to you publicly, as well as this data on the Department of Education website. The student survey asks dozens and dozens of pages of questions, from demographics to how well do you sleep at night, do you participate in extracurriculars, but it does ask some questions about ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, including sexual violence. So for Richfield Public School District specifically, on page 27 of that report, it asks, has anyone who is not a relative or family member, so this would be anybody that was an acquaintance, a friend, or a stranger, ever pressured, tricked, or forced you to do something sexual, or done something sexual to you against your wishes? And as we look across the data, when we get to the junior girls, we're seeing at 6%, and the junior boys, we're seeing 2%. If you look a little further back, we had about 1 in 5 of the 8th grade girls actually report that this had happened to them. So you can see how this data can change over time. The next question is, has any relative or family member, so again, looking for people within the family unit, ever pressured, tricked, or forced you to do something sexual or done something sexual to you? Again, by the time we get over to the juniors, we have about 8% of the girls and 2% of the boys saying, yes, this has happened. And if we combine those numbers, which is what we should do to compare to the previous stat, right, we are at about that 1 in 9 and that 1 in 20 for girls and boys that have experienced sexual violence. There's one other question that gets asked, and that is, have you been in a casual or serious relationship where your partner ever pressured, tricked, or forced you to do something sexual, or did something sexual to you against your wishes? The double asterisk there is just to indicate they did not ask the 8th graders this question. But again, if we look over at the juniors, we actually have a higher amount of the boys saying this has happened to them than the girls. But again, we are still in line with those national statistics of that 1 in 9 and 1 in 20. I want to make it really clear, the reason I put these numbers up is not to make anybody sad or concern anybody. We go all around the state doing this presentation. Those numbers are never zero, like, just to be frank. This is a national issue we see. Sexual violence as a whole is fairly prevalent, again, especially prior to age 18. That age 13 to age 17 range is the predominant age range we see for victimization on our registry. The reason I put this up is because if you find out Mr. Lacy moves tomorrow, or Mr. Queen moves tomorrow, or all of the level 3s in Richfield leave, you still need to have these conversations as family, as community, as schools, as places of worship, because this is still happening. Right? We know sexual violence is underreported. We know that it is not often able to be charged out. Many of those that are even charged very rarely come to prison or even get to the point where we're assessing their risk level. So it is crucial that at a base level, we're having conversations with our loved ones about how to keep ourselves safe. So now that I've given you that information, how do you actually do it, right? So I could present a whole college course, I think, on how to have these conversations with your family and do a family safety plan. I've got about 5 minutes with you on a recording, but I hope you walk away with some tips that you feel like you can start implementing. So what we want to do in talking to our children is, first of all, we want to teach them the names of their body parts, the actual names of their body parts, not cutesy nicknames, because that can make it really difficult to identify a disclosure later. We have to teach them that some parts of their body are private. Private means that we do not look at them or touch them on anyone else, and that we also do not allow anybody to look at them or touch them on us. We do need to give them examples, right? There may be some situations where an adult needs access to their body, like a doctor doing a medical exam or a loved one assisting with a hygiene activity. But in those activities, children should know those should never be a secret from mom, dad, or whoever the caregiver is. They have the right to ask questions, and it's okay for them to say no. No is a full sentence. We want to teach children that no means something, so that when somebody says it to them, they hear it, but also that they know it has power when they say it. So if somebody doesn't respect their no, that sets off a red flag for them, where they need to go get mom or dad or other trusted adult. There are some additional tips that we have. We want to talk about secrets. Secrets in isolation are one of the biggest tools that predatory offenders often utilize. So this just kind of takes that tool out of their toolbox. The phrase I like to give parents is to tell their kids, we don't have secrets in our household, just surprises. Surprises are happy things that you share with somebody you love, right? That's what we do with Christmas presents and surprise birthday parties and those types of things. Secrets have a level of shame to them, kind of a level of fear that they might make somebody upset if they disclose those. So we want to make sure we're teaching children that we don't have secrets in our house. We don't have secrets from mom and dad. If an adult especially asks you to keep a secret, that's something you immediately need to come to your trusted caregiver with. Reassure them that they won't get in trouble. Those of us that talk to children who've experienced sexual violence know that disclosures often look like kind of dipping a toe in a pool. It's often something very small to kind of open the door to see if they can talk about this, if you are a safe adult for them to talk to about this. So if somebody's asking question about their body, if they're asking questions about something somebody else said about their body or may have done to their body, we want to reassure the person talking that they will not get in trouble for whatever it is they have to tell us. And when they come to you, make time for them. We're all very busy, but these conversations about body boundaries, questions about consent and relationships with adults, those are important conversations for us to have with kids, and they need our full attention when they're having them. So if a child comes to you with a question and you don't have time in that moment to fully answer it, thank them for asking the question. Again, reassure them they're not in trouble and let them know you're going to talk to them about it later. You can give them a time if you have one when you're going to talk to them, but let them know you're going to do that so you can answer their question fully and make sure you follow up. So if you do kind of delay it till later to answer that question, make sure you're doing the follow through. With the teenagers, we can age that conversation up. So again, that 13 to 17 age range, we know in Minnesota is a large portion of our victimization pool on the registry. Nationally, we typically look at age 16 to 24 as the highest risk range. So with our teenagers, we do want to talk about this directly. Again, we're seeing that our 8th graders are already reporting that this is happening to them. We're seeing freshmen indicating that people they're in dating relationships with, right? They're already reporting that they're experiencing this. So we want to have these conversations. It can be a very easy in to use the media to open that door. I don't know about you, but true crime documentaries are often on in my household or podcasts. If you turn the news on, even there's typically reference to sexual violence at some point, unfortunately. It can be a very easy ask for a teen to then say, do you know what you would do if that happened to a friend of yours? Don't look the teenager in the eye when they're answering you. I feel like kids tend to talk more when they feel like they're not under a microscope. But that's a very easy ask. And we also know that kids tend to talk to each other before they bring an adult to the conversation. So you may want to help them talk through that scenario. If a friend says somebody's hurting them, what are they going to do? Who are they going to talk to? What do they think they would say? If you're comfortable, use your own experience to tell a safety story. Most of us have experienced or know someone that has experienced sexual violence, dating violence, or domestic violence. Again, that was predominant in Mr. Lacy's background. His predatory offense are linked with domestic violence. If you have experienced that or know someone who has, use that experience to tell a safety story. That can label you with the kids as somebody who gets it, right? It makes you a more safe adult for them to come to, and can just let them know that this isn't something that necessarily happens elsewhere. It is something that could happen to a friend of theirs or to them. Talk about caring for their friend's safety and talk about sexual assault directly. We have to call it what it is. We have to label it for what it is. Along with that comes talking about all the green flags, right? Talking about what a healthy relationship looks like, what consent is. But we have to talk about those red flags and call sexual assault what it is. Talk about what ignoring consent actually means. That then becomes assault. We've seen an uptick in online sexual exploitation since the pandemic. Again, that's not really a Mr. Queen or Mr. Lacy's background. Their predatory offense predate that. But what we're learning from the teens in those cases is they don't know how to say no or how to report about someone that they like, about someone who's nice. As adults, we need to give them that language about how to say no, about when to loop an adult in to help keep them safer. Looking at the next slide, these conversations you start having with your kiddos, whether they're very young or in their teenage years, needs to go into an overall family safety plan. Everyone in the family needs to be aware of what that is. We need to start talking with our family about abuse. That's why we have a family safety plan. We want to keep ourselves safe. Set clear family boundaries. These are things like who can share a bed with whom? When do we knock on doors? What level of nudity is acceptable in like a communal space? Make sure your family knows that this is the expectation you have in your home for anybody that enters your home. And this is also the expectation that you have for your children when they're in other people's homes as well, because another family may not have the same set of rules that your family does. Get safe adults involved. Again, anybody that comes into your home needs to respect those rules and know your local resources and how to use them before you need them. I am going to give you that information before this is over. But this kind of creates a foundation of safety planning. You know, in Minnesota, we have safety plans at home for tornadoes, for fire, for blizzards, right? We winterize the house or the car. We also need to have that for bodily safety within our families. Looking at the next slide, this is kind of like the last little exercise I like to give folks because I think it's a really quick one you can kind of do in the car with your kids. Who are 5 adults in their life where if somebody was hurting them or had done something to them or was asking them to keep a secret, that they could talk to? You might want to know who they are. You might want to know who your children feel closest to and safest with. Some of the answers might surprise you. But I also, as you get to the end of this recording and kind of in the days after, as you're processing the information you've heard today, ask you to consider the inverse. Who are 5 kids in your life that might come to you if somebody was hurting them? Do you know what you would say? Do you know what you would do? Again, overreactions or fear can cause children to shut down, which is really what we don't want. If somebody is trying to make a disclosure, we want them to feel safe to continue to talk. So thinking ahead to that situation, what you might do can help, because then you'll default to that plan versus a stress response. So I just encourage you, as uncomfortable as it is to think about that, because it could keep somebody safer later if they do make a disclosure. So with that, I just want to keep going forward. This is my unit's contact information and our phone number. If you have questions about Mr. Lacy or Mr. Queen or anybody else under the Department of Correction supervision or on registration, please feel free to give us a call. Again, your 911 or your local police department is going to be the best resource if you're in danger or feeling unsafe or seeing something that you don't feel is safe. I do want to commend Chief Henthorne and the Richfield Police Department for having this conversation. These are not fun topics to talk about. They did not have to do this, and they chose to do this because, again, we believe more informed communities are safer communities. So as I commended your school district, I do want to also commend the police department for their role in bringing this information forward. Before I toss it back to Sonia, I do just want to highlight your local resources. Cornerstone provides sexual violence and domestic violence services in your area, as well as SVC, the Sexual Violence Center. They provide services across Hennepin, Carver, and Scott County. You do also have a couple local resources available through the U. So the Aurora Center addresses gender-based violence, and then the Community University Healthcare Center does also have domestic and sexual violence advocates on staff with their therapists to provide additional support, again, in addition to your local police department if you do need to make a report. I think, do we also have the national resources on here? Is that the next slide? Nope. So I'm going to give it back to Sonia, and she's going to wrap us up.
Sounds good. Thank you, Heather. So in pulling everything together, we really wanted to highlight really the thoughts around the 390s, what we talk about all the time in the world of those that have committed sexual offenses. So bigger picture, 90% do not reoffend. And so when we look at that number, we look at in terms of that a lot of the resources, a lot of the research in showing that an informed community having protective factors like we talked about, so support units, having people that are having stable housing as well as a stable job helps in that process of not going down the road of reoffending. 90% are known to the victim, as we had talked about in the slide previously, that a very small percentage are in the stranger category, but a majority of those are known to the victim, whether it's a family member or acquaintance. So keeping that in mind when we're talking as community members, when we are observing and having those difficult conversations. And then a big surprise that many folks don't always know is that 90% have never been previously convicted. So when we think about the significant numbers of how many individuals actually make it to the prison system, the research shows like it's a very, it's like, I believe, maybe 1 to 3%. And so 90% of those, one, either are just entering into the prison system or have a conviction for the first time and they've never been convicted. And sometimes there is the piece where they don't go through the prison system. And so that awareness and having those difficult conversations and having just the familiarity of this information is huge in going forward. I also want to highlight, we talk about the 2 R's. And so it's really about the relationship, not the residence, meaning it's about the relationship with the person joining the community. It's about the relationship of community members in having, first and foremost, public safety and having recognition and working with the Richfield Police Department in if there are concerns or having conversations of what is my right as a community member. And so really taking that into effect, that it is about it's about relationship, not about residency, not knowing, like we know where Mr. Lacy and Mr. Queen will be living. It is not off the table, though, of knowing that there are other individuals in the community. And so making sure that we are diligent about creating those relationships. So social proximity is more important than the geographic proximity. Again, the contact information for the local law enforcement, again, thank you to the Richfield Police Department. This is their contact information to call and develop those relationships, which we highly encourage. And this is our slide. Again, Brad from the Richfield Police Department, LaTanya and Tara, their agent information, the ISR as well as the probation agent. And I will turn it over to Chief Jay Henthorn.
Thank you, Sonia and Heather, for providing this information to our community. As stated, if you as the community have questions, please do not hesitate to call us on the 9800 number, or as presented on the screen, contact Lieutenant Brad Drana at 612-861-9825. Thank you for tuning in today.